What's up, everybody? Welcome to Monday. This is The Sweat. I'm Adam Kaufman. We have got a lot to cover, including, of course, covers, spreads, prop bets, you name it. We'll look back at a busy weekend in the NFL, preview the Week 11 conclusion between the defending champion Buccaneers and Giants later on tonight. We'll get to that a little bit later on. Plus, of course, hoops and hockey over the course of this show. But let's get right into it with our NFL panel, DraftKings contributors Jeff Ulrich and Reed T. Fowler. It's time for the NFL hangover, boys. Overreactions to what we've seen so far in Week 11. Jeff, we begin with you. Pierce, he has been texting me all morning long. He's DMing me. He's reaching out on LinkedIn. I'm hearing from him everywhere because he's very disappointed he was not scheduled for this very show to gloat about the Titans' loss to the Texans. So give us any reason at all you can come up with to not just rip up our Tennessee Super Bowl tickets and buy the dip to plus 2,000.
Okay, first of all, Pierce has probably never texted you in his life. But as far as the Texans go, yeah, let's talk about them for a little bit. I mean, or the Titans, I should excuse me. We don't really need to talk about the Texans much. Great win, by the way. Great job. But the Titans are in an interesting spot. I mean, we knew that this was going to happen eventually with the Titans. You know, they beat these teams. You know, they beat the Saints without, like, Derrick Henry. They beat the Rams when nobody even gave them any shot in that game. But you knew that this team would eventually throw in a stinker. And they did it earlier in the season, even when they had Derrick Henry against the Jets. This is the kind of team the Titans are. They will play down to their opponents every time and again, every now and again. But as we've seen from time and time throughout, the last 3 years, they also step their game up against stiff competition, especially when they're undervalued. Yeah, I think you should think about the Titans here. This is still a team who has a shot at getting Derrick Henry back late in the year. A.J. Brown isn't going to be out forever. Their defense has played a little bit better of late. It's not like they allowed 40 points to the Texans or something. The Texans got up early, ran the ball a little bit, and the Titans offense couldn't respond. The bigger issue is this like the end of the Titans offense, and can they not figure out how to move the ball a little bit? I don't think that's going to be the case. I think they'll be able to do enough. Again, this AFC is wide open. I like going to the Texans to win the conference at plus 800. That's been my kind of go-to bet. And now that they've dipped again, I think they're still a good bet.
Reed, I think Jeff hit on this, obviously, that, if we're talking about a team that is, at full strength, has its best players, has Derrick Henry, and they're still sliding to teams like the Texans, that's one story. But when they're so clearly undermanned, you have to figure they're going to get right eventually, right?
Yeah, and that's when you look at some of these features when it's, MVPs, when it's Super Bowl, you try and buy these teams when the sentiment, right, the emotion of it is that it's all-time low, and that's what Tennessee is right now. And Houston, I don't think this was a huge surprise. Like Jeff mentioned, you play at your zenith, your apex, you're going to fall, and you're going to fall hard, and especially when you throw 4 interceptions when you're Ryan Tannehill and you fumble it twice, you get the ball back, but you fumble it twice. That's not going to cut it. The one thing that worries me, though, with Tennessee, their schedule actually is not bad when you talk about like playing up to their competition. They got New England, they got the 49ers, they play Houston, Jacksonville, Pittsburgh, and Miami. So that kind of scares you if they play down to their competition, but obviously you want to see them beat New England. It's that the fact that the running game is really non-existent. Dontrell Hilliard is an undrafted free agent in his 4th year. He's 5'11", 205 pounds, whatever it is, and he's getting the bulk of the carries. It feels weird saying this, but you need to feature Adrian Peterson because that's the style of running that they need to do. And most of his passes, Ryan Tannehill last week, were within 10 yards of the line of scrimmage. That's why defenses like Houston can just have their linebackers and their safeties play up, pick them off, and then play defensively. So, with the Tennessee Titans, they need to get healthy, and they need to do it quickly because the AFC is wide open, especially when you look at a team like the Colts who are at plus 4,000 to win the Super Bowl.
Boys, let's stay with the upset theme. You mentioned the Colts, Reed. They blew out the previously division-leading Bills in Buffalo. You like how I throw that in. Indy's still 2 back in the South, though. The Colts odds to make the playoffs, they're minus 130. Reed, last week we talked all about Jonathan Taylor, the Offensive Player of the Year odds. He's up to plus 300 from plus 2,000. A zillion touchdown game will do that for you. Also up to plus 2,000 from plus 10,000 for league MVP. So do either of those bets interest you?
Yeah, OPOY, Offensive Player of the Year, is much more intriguing to me. You look at how that award goes. It usually goes to the best receiver running back, right? Or best non-offensive quarterback, right? 3 of the last 7 years have gone to a running back specifically. You saw DeMarco Murray, Todd Gurley, and then Derrick Henry in 2020. And look, Derrick Henry had an amazing season last year, a season that we probably won't see from anybody other than Jonathan Taylor and Derrick Henry again in the future. So yeah, Offensive Player of the Year is much more enticing because the last time the MVP was won, coincidentally, from a running back was AP in 2012. The quarterback position, though, that's where, this is a year, guys, that the quarterback position at the very top has not been playing stellar at all. I still think that award is up for grabs. Look at Lamar and Kyler Murray. These guys have been out of Kyler Murray's been out for the last 3 or 4 weeks, and Lamar out last week. If those numbers seem enticing, if you look at their schedules in Arizona, they get the Bears, the Rams, the Lions, the Colts, the Cowboys, and Seattle. Kyler can pick those teams apart. And for Baltimore, you get Cleveland twice, Cincinnati, Pittsburgh, the Rams, the Steelers twice. So both of those teams and those quarterbacks could have a nice little path to MVP.
What about you, Jeff? I know there is no bigger Carson Wentz fan than you, so are you all in on the Colts?
I mean, I'm pretty much the same sentiment as Reed. I do think he's a very good bet at plus 300 to win the Offensive Player of the Year. I mean, typically that award, again, it's a lot of it is just what have you done for me lately? And if Jonathan Taylor ends the season stronger than Cooper Kupp, and I really do think it's down to we're pretty close to getting it down to like a 2-person race here, then it's probably going to go to Taylor. And, again, you're getting better odds on Taylor. You're getting over double the value on Cooper Kupp. Look at where Cooper Kupp is in the receiving totals and stuff versus Jonathan Taylor in the rushing. Nobody is catching Jonathan Taylor in total rushing yards this year. I'm sorry, Nick Chubb is 300 yards behind him. He would need basically a couple historic games. I think there is a chance that a player like Devontae Adams spikes up maybe with some heavier usage towards the end of the year, and maybe it cuts into Cooper Kupp's lead where it's at least very close at the end. I'll take Taylor here for sure in the Offensive Player. I think that's a good bet at plus 300. Reed mentioned it. I'm sorry. I mean, the Colts would have to almost overtake Tennessee for the division win, I think, for Jonathan Taylor to get serious MVP discussion. It has been a mixed bag at the top for quarterbacks, but it's such a quarterback-centric award, the MVP award, that I think even just a couple good games by Josh Allen to end the season, and he probably gets the nod.
What's up with the Bills, Moose? Talking about quarterbacks, obviously Carson Wentz. I know you're a huge Josh Allen guy. Buffalo's still favored to take the East at minus 175 and the conference at plus 350, but they're now second to the Patriots in the division with a pair of head-to-head meetings left, 2 of those in the next 4 weeks, so it should be pretty interesting. But should Buffalo still be favored in both these spots?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, and I was just using Josh Allen as an example. It could be any quarterback that gets hot at the end of the year, Rodgers, Brady, whatever. But as far as the Bills go, look, the reason they're still favored is simple. I mean, the market still thinks that the Bills are the better team here, and they have 2 games in hand over the Patriots. They're apparently going to be favored. If they had those games right now, the Bills would obviously be the favorites. That's why they're still the favorites in the division. Now, is the Bills the team you want to back here at minus 175? No, I really don't think that's the case. You're essentially getting the Patriots, as underdogs in those games coming up versus the Bills by betting them at plus 135. We've seen from the Bills, when their offensive line is clicking and that passing offense is clicking, they can just blow teams out because their defense is still quite good. But man, I mean, at some point, this team has to show a little bit of consistency because it has been few and far between this year. So I think the Bills are still overvalued in the market right now, minus 175. Are they still the slightly better team? I don't even know if you can say that anymore. The New England defense has certainly surpassed them. New England runs the ball. Buffalo has no running game to fall back on, and that's really been the story of this year. If that offensive line isn't protecting Josh Allen and the passing game isn't clicking, this team can be had. So give me the Patriots here right now. I don't think it's the supreme bet or you have to do it, but right now you look at those division odds, man. Yeah, you got to lean Patriots.
Jeff, you can be skeptical all you want about whether Pierce has been texting me, but I promise you, Reed and we've been texting all season about these Bills because he knows that I have been a doubter. So, Reed, what's your outlook on this team?
Yeah, I mean, all the Patriots homers and by proxy, the Buffalo downers.
Thank you. Yep.
Exactly. Of course. Right. It makes sense. Everything that Jeff laid out makes perfect sense. But I'm actually going to side with I get why the Bills are still the favorite, right? Because a lot of sportsbook, they want to protect themselves because this team can get hot. We've seen Buffalo get hot, especially towards the end of seasons. They play, obviously, in cold weather, and those close games, they go either way, right, in cold weather. And Buffalo, when you get that type of home field advantage, it's going to make a lot of sense. And you look at their remaining schedule with the Saints, the Patriots twice, like you mentioned, Koff, the Bucs and Carolina in their next 5. That's a pretty tough test. Like if they go 3-2, sort of like, I would like to talk about the college playoffs. If they go 3-2 and they actually look decent, it's going to make a lot of sense on why the market, right, is emotionally connected to the Buffalo Bills with how good Josh Allen is playing. There's a correlated stat of him being one of the favorites for the MVP, right? It just looks like that. And if you take a look at their defense and their offense, they're hitting a little bit of a skid. But I have faith in Sean McDermott and Brian Daboll that they have to learn how to adjust, right? We see with Kansas City and Andy Reid, it took a while for Patrick Mahomes to be like, hey, I'm going to check down Charlie this game and beat these teams by 1,000 paper cuts. That's what the Bills have to do. And if they can skate out those next 5 games going 3-2, I still think they deserve to be the favorite. Even though the Patriots, if you look at their last 5 wins, Jets, Chargers, the Sam Darnold-led Carolina Panthers, Cleveland, and Atlanta, not exactly the best teams out there. And you could argue the same thing for Buffalo, but the Patriots have had a pretty nice test of 5 games, even though they're winning. You got to give them the credit that they're winning those games.
The AFC East, it's not the prettiest division, sort of to your point, Reed, but the AFC North still very much up for grabs, and you've got every team up over 500 right now. The Ravens, they just barely rallied by the Bears without Lamar Jackson, and Baltimore, of course, splitting its last 4 after that 5-game winning streak. Should the Ravens still be a clear favorite to win this division, Reed?
I think so. Look, the defense has a lot of issues, right? Patrick Queen in their linebacker position has a lot of issues. He's getting better. But I still look at this team, and if you look at their record, guys, the teams that they've beat, they have a difference maker in Lamar Jackson. And I know we didn't see him last week because he was ill, but they still have a lot of solid players. Marquise Brown not in as well. Latavius Murray does come back. I think that's going to help this team. And I'm not scared. Cincinnati, they beat a bad Raiders team. Trust me. I've watched enough Raiders games to know that this is exactly who the Raiders are. Putting up 32 against the Raiders isn't exactly a tough test, right? We've seen Cincinnati lose to the Jets. So I'm not exactly scared of Cincinnati. You still have a young team that come down the stretch. It's going to be a little difficult. I give the coaching favorite to a guy like John Harbaugh in every situation. And Lamar Jackson, I still think he's one of the best quarterbacks and a guy who could absolutely change the landscape of any single game.
Bengals just a game back in that division here, Jeff. What are your thoughts on the Ravens or any other contender for that matter in the North?
I mean, there is not a team in the NFL who has been luckier this year than the Baltimore Ravens. I mean, I've said this like every week on this show, but even just last week, okay, they have to start their backup quarterback. What happens to the other quarterback on the other side? He goes out like a quarter into the game. I mean, how lucky can this team get? A 66-yard field goal to beat the Detroit Lions, overtime games, penalties. This team could so easily be under 500 in the record right now. I think their comeuppance is coming. They have the Browns twice, the Steelers and the Bengals, the Packers and the Rams in their next 6 games here. The Bengals are so close to being a very, very good team. They've gotten more efficient on offense. Their defense is solid. It's not really up there with elite. I also think the Browns could go on a late season surge here if Nick Chubb stays healthy. So all things considered, I am definitely fading the Baltimore Ravens as favorites. I think you could even look to the Browns at plus 450 or the Bengals at plus 300. All things considered here, the Ravens have a really tough schedule. I know it's Lamar Jackson. He's still the best player in this division. And if I'm wrong, it's because Lamar just went nuts over the last few games. But I think this team rides the right side of variance to end the year. And I think they end up getting overtaken.
Guys, after putting up 43 points on the Falcons, Cowboys just limped out to a 19-9 loss in Kansas City. Not even a single touchdown, obviously. It was all field goals. The Chiefs back to being AFC favorites for the Super Bowl at plus 750. Cowboys still very much in the conversation, plus 800 over in the NFC. So which team do you feel like you learned more about here, Moose? I mean, are you more inclined to chase the Chiefs for futures bets? Are you starting to fade the Cowboys? What are you thinking?
So, I mean, one underrated story of the last 3 weeks, while everyone was busy beating up on the Chiefs, is that their defense has really improved. It's improved in all facets too, especially against the run. You saw it last night. Or yesterday, last afternoon, I should say. They put a cap in Ezekiel Elliott. They didn't let him take over the game. They didn't let Dak run the ball much. This defense has gotten better, and that's a nice spot to be as a Kansas City Chiefs backer because. This offense, I mean, if the only thing the Chiefs need to fix right now is the offense, that's not bad. I mean, because you do still have Patrick Mahomes and Tyreek Hill there to hopefully do that. So, yeah, I'm not like going out of my way to bet the Chiefs. I still think this AFC is wide open, but that is the biggest story out of that game. I still think Dallas is a very solid team. Maybe not as solid as people were thinking they were last week, but the NFC, certainly, like, they deserve to be in the top 4 or 5 teams there. At plus 400, I would take bigger money on, like, the Packers or maybe even the Rams there, but I think the Chiefs deserve to be, like, co-favorites right now because that AFC, again, I mean, I like the Patriots, but the Ravens at plus 600, I'm not backing them. The Titans, I think, are interesting at plus 8, but the Chiefs definitely deserve to be co-favorites right now. This is a team that's, like, one Mahomes hot stretch away from basically being in top form again. So, yeah, I chase this one.
Reed, we were just showing the odds on the screen. These are 2 of the top 5 odds, favorite odds to win a Super Bowl, obviously, here. So same thing I asked Jeff. Is there one team of these 2 you felt like you learned a little bit more about from this game yesterday?
Yeah. The defense, for Kansas City is looked good in spots, right? But the one thing that you have to worry about, though, is how much of it is actually the foundational change in their defense, right? Spagnuolo is still a guy who will send 80,000 blitzes every single game, and that puts him in really, really bad spots. And if you had a guy like Daniel Sorensen, who's one of the worst in coverage, that's going to hurt. And again, going back to this division and going back to the Raiders, when you can look really good against a Raiders offense when they can't stretch the field and their best their best deep ball is Darren Waller. But going back to this question specifically, like, I'm less inclined to be down on the Dallas Cowboys because I do think they do have the foundational pieces. Their offensive line is finally healthy. Chris Jones, I think if there's any storyline too here is that Chris Jones on the defensive side was actually going back into the nose tackle position, and he absolutely wrecked this game, right? Dak Prescott, I almost said Derek Prescott. Dak Prescott was under pressure all day long. He couldn't do anything. And when you have CeeDee Lamb go out, when Amari Cooper is already out, when Ezekiel Elliott was banged up, you got Dalton Schultz, Cedric Wilson, and Michael Gallup as your offensive threats. It's not going to cut it, right? It's not going to cut it against the Chiefs. Any defense will look good against those guys, especially if you don't practice as number ones. So I'm less down on the Cowboys, more up on the Chiefs because, like Jeff mentioned, they can get it going very quickly. They have a really good coaching staff and obviously a very, very good quarterback. But I'm liking the Dallas Cowboys right now. If they can keep on slipping, they got a decent defense too that can stop a lot of these teams, and they have an offense to stay with anyone.
Reed, I looked up Derek Prescott. The only one I could find is a clinical mental health counselor in North Carolina. That's it.
That's what I need, Koff.
Yeah.
I need that. Trying to figure out the NFL, I need a mental specialist.
Don't we all? All right, we'll bring back Jeff and Reed a little bit later on. NFL talk, of course, with Monday Night Action on the way. But if you missed us, and shame on you if you did, on the Bally Sports Network across the country yesterday, we caught up with former Steelers and Giants receiver, also a Super Bowl champ, Plaxico Burress. Can his old Big Blue squad pull an upset tonight? Does he have a favorite wideout in the league today? Let's find out. Plaxico, you're up.
The Giants are going to be facing the Bucs, but there is a history with Tom Brady going up against the Giants as a heavy favorite, man. Oh, yeah. The 2007 New York team.
This is not the same Giants, though.
It's true. It's true. Yeah. But we all know.
We had 10 on the court under center, and yours truly, 17, was standing out on the edge. Just waiting for any kind of single coverage in the game. We was going to end the game.
Yeah.
But with that being said, defensively, for the Buccaneers, I believe that the Giants are going to be in a little bit of trouble because, there's one guy on that defense who I thought as a player he should still be in a Giant uniform, and that is JPP. Pierre Paul. Man, I think when the whole thing happened with him, us getting rid of him in the prime of his career, it kind of lit a fire, under him a little bit. And he's playing just absolute, first team All-Pro football, which he was a first team All-Pro here. I don't know what happened, but defensively, I think they're a little too fast for the Giants. Out on the edge, they have to find a way to protect the quarterback, which they have not been able to do for years now. And, I think offensively for Tampa Bay, they have the advantage basically against anybody that they play on Sunday. So it's going to be a tough task, especially for the Giants, to be able to go down and get a win. Nobody's expecting them to win this game, even myself included.
Yep.
It's a tough mountain to climb. playing the Buccaneers in Tampa Bay on Monday Night Football. That's going to be tough for them.
Yeah, and the Bucs are perfect in Tampa since Super Bowl 55. But New York's D has had its moments over the year. But Tom Brady barely has 2 bad games in a row, which he has, and like never 3 in a row, especially when the team needs him like this bad.
Right. Yeah, I just think that the Bucs have one of the premier offenses in all of football.
Yeah.
I mean, they're basically scoring 30, 40 points every weekend. So it's just basically telling you that. He has all the players. He has all the weapons. I don't know if Gronk is coming back, but just to add him back into the mix and you get Antonio Brown back healthy, it's just a lot for any defense to kind of slow down, especially when you have the GOAT on the center. He's basically a coach on a football field. You can't fool him. You can't trick him. He's seen basically every coverage in the world that you can possibly show to him. And when he gets the ball in his hands, he already knows where he's going with football. Yep. And it's just such a big advantage for the offense and those guys that he's surrounded with to have him to be able to make those decisions. And he doesn't screw it up a lot, man.
No.
He's usually right, I would say 99% of the time. But it's just going to be a tough game for them. But, I don't see them, winning this game. And I just hope it doesn't get to the point where, it's a blowout.
Yeah, Bruce Arians and Byron Leftwich. I feel like they just let Tom Brady do whatever he wants with that offense, which is kind of weird, like to see him throw a couple picks against Washington last week. But, hey, the Giants, this Giants team has shown positive flashes, Plax, especially with the receivers. I mean, it's been a tough group to gauge because of injuries, but when healthy, and you've seen this, rookie KADARIUS TONEY has been a game changer for New York. When you watch him play, what stands out to you?
The first thing that jumps off the page to me about Toney is that he's electric when he gets the football in his hands. So with that being said, you try to get him the football as fast as you possibly can and let his athletic ability show what he's great at. And that is getting him screens, getting him the ball out of the backfield, chucking the ball out to him at the line of scrimmage, and just getting him the football as fast as you possibly can so he can go out and be the guy that y'all drafted. He was never one of those guys that would, be on the outside playing against man-to-man, one-on-one, and you would just throw him the ball all game. He's not that kind of wide receiver. So you have to find a way to get him the ball early, because when he gets the ball in open field, he's tough to bring down. I think everybody sees that, how quick he is, and quick twitch and all of those kind of things. So if I'm the coach and the quarterback for the New York Giants, I'm trying to get this ball and get this guy the ball at least 10, 11, 12 touches a game, so he can go out and be the player that we all know that he can be.
Yeah, and I know you've been in his shoes before, and then the pressure of being a first-round pick. What's the biggest lesson, now we're halfway through the season, what's the biggest lesson you learned halfway through your first campaign in the NFL?
Get some rest.
Yeah.
I think that's the first thing that I noticed, getting through the first 8 or 9 games, when you're in college. If you don't make it to a bowl game, then you're usually finished around Thanksgiving or the first couple of weeks of December. But, it's still a long season. I think for him, all the rookies and myself, you just got to find a way to navigate your way and take care of your body, because you still have another half of the season left. And especially with him being a first-round pick coming in New York, it's just a lot of pressure, I think, that is put on him, which is unfair, because, we haven't been really good offensively. And Daniel Jones really hasn't been able to really, have an opportunity to be a great quarterback, because he doesn't have enough time to throw the football. So with all of those things combined, I think for Toney, some of the criticism that he receives is unfair. Mm-hmm. But, you see that when he does get the ball in hand, he's special. And for the rest of the season, man, get as much rest as you possibly can.
Yeah, maybe one day he will be one of the best receivers in the league. You can see definitely potential there. But as of right now, who do you think is the best wide receiver in the NFL? This is tough.
I have a few guys that I really love, man. Obviously, DeAndre Hopkins, who I just think is just a dog of a player. And, he wants to go out and dominate get the guy across from him, every single weekend. And you have DK Metcalf, was one of those guys, but he reminds me of like a faster Terrell Owens.
Yeah, and he's huge. He's huge like Terrell too, and he's built like a linebacker. That shirtless pic of him on the internet, where he's like a 12-pack, is frightening.
I know he gets that ball in his hands, man. He's tough to bring down with those cornerbacks who only weigh, 175, 80 pounds. And, Keenan Allen is having one of those years where, nobody's really talking about him. He's been one of my favorites. And, also Mike Evans. If you notice anything about all the guys that I picked, they're all above 6'2" and 6'3".
Yeah. I was going to say, are you starting to see yourself in a lot of these guys? Right.
Because it's like Mike Evans and Keenan and DK, we're like the last of the Mohicans.
Yeah.
Now everybody's going to this little, KADARIUS Toneys and, the Jarvis Landrys and OBJs and we need to get back to having some big wide receivers out on the edge. That excites me when I see these guys. You just throw the ball up to them, and Tom Brady's basically saying, you know what, my guy's better than your guy. I don't care who you put out there. That's what we love as wide receivers, when our quarterbacks just throw us the ball and say, hey, big fella, you know what, you're better than him. Just go make a play. So I have a lot of wide receivers that I really love, but I think pairing DeAndre Hopkins with Kyler Murray, it took him to the next level as far as being a wide receiver. So I would take him.
Yeah. Do you remember? Can you take a guess for me at which game of your career was your best fantasy performance?
Oh,
I feel like you got to know. Maybe you don't know the exact points.
It's either Atlanta or Dallas.
Yeah. All right. It's one of those. You got to pick one. Come on. It was a historic day for you.
It was Atlanta.
Yeah. Oh, my God. Ridiculous.
It was Atlanta. It was just,
you had 9 catches, Plax. 9 catches, 253 yards, 2 touchdowns, north of 49 fantasy points. That would break the slate these days. And you remember how frustrating that game was for you? I'm sure 34-34 tie.
Yeah, and we ended up tying. I remember sitting on the sideline with Hines Ward during that game, and we were actually talking about what we were going to have dinner after the game, because we got into the fourth quarter and the score of the game was 34-17. We're thinking the game is over. But guess what? Michael Vick came to town.
Yep.
And it was one of those performances. In one quarter, I was like, we cannot get this guy on the ground.
Mm-mm.
We could not tackle him. It was like he was running around on the football field and he was just throwing down banana peels. Everybody was just falling all around him. It was, and we ended up tying the game, and it ended up hurting us, that year, going into the playoffs. I believe we ended up, going down to Tennessee and losing that game. But that one tie messes up because we would have had home field advantage.
Yep.
And so we ended up losing the home field advantage because of that tie. But it was just one of those days where you just felt like you were out there by yourself. Yeah. Even though I was playing against, Ashley Ambrose and I forget the other guys. Ray Buchanan. Yep. It was just, I couldn't believe they were just staying in single high, just playing single coverage, thinking that they were just going to, stop me. And Tommy just kept throwing it up there, and we just kept making it.
A lot of great stuff right there. Hopefully you enjoyed it. We are back on the Sweat with our NHL panel. That's right, Hockey Talk. AJ Scholes, my guy Paul Bruno from RotoWire. This is the NHL opening face-off. 6 games tonight, guys, so it is a lighter slate. DFS first. Paul, who is your favorite center?
Look, the easy choice is to go with Mikko Rantanen of the Avs with that favorable matchup against the with a high-octane offense that features the top power play in the league pretty much, and a top line that scores 2 or 3 goals every night against the depleted Senators lineup. They had a few players back from COVID, but it's still a tasty matchup. He costs $8,500 tonight. If you want to save a few bucks there, I'd recommend Sebastian Aho, also a first-line center for the Hurricanes juggernaut. He's their top guy and rolling along at a point-per-game pace over his last 10 games. Gets a good matchup against the San Jose team that's given up 4+ in 4 of their last 5 games and priced at $7,600. If you want to go even lower than that, one final pick, I'd consider Columbus pivot Boone Jenner, costing only $5,800. He's used against the lowly Sabres that have given up a ton of goals lately, and he scored 5 and 7 points in his last 10 games.
So, AJ, those first two guys that Paul mentioned are the ones that jumped out as me as well. You could also certainly look at Nazem Kadri. You could shout out Mark Scheifele. There are a bunch of different options. Is there someone from that group that you like or somebody else?
Well, I do think Aho is the way to go tonight. Paul mentioned he's not cheap, 7,600, but he's been unstoppable lately. He's got 3 multi-point efforts in his last 4 contests. The Sharks actually haven't been walkovers lately. James Reimer playing pretty decent. He's got 2.46 goals against average in his last 4 contests. But look, he's not playing the Hurricanes, who are phenomenal. Outside of that, I do think Nazem Kadri is worth a look if you're going to go further down. He's been really, red hot lately as well. I'll probably use Sidney Crosby tonight because it looks like the Penguins have figured out their game, but I'll be honest, that's betting more with my heart than my head at this point.
AJ, let's stay with you. I need a favorite wing tonight. Is it a Winnipeg wing for you?
It's not. I'm going to stick with Carolina here and go with Andrei Svechnikov. 9-game goal drought is obviously a concern, but he's averaging 2.4 shots per game over that stretch. He's tallied 8 helpers along the way, 4 of which have come with a man advantage. If you don't want to pay up for him, you can stack that entire line and get Seth Jarvis in as the 3rd member of the Canes top line, and he'll cost you just $3,300 here, which is phenomenal for a guy that's got goals in 3 straight games. I think Carolina, for their part, has to consider keeping this guy beyond the 9-game threshold for his entry-level deal. He's got to stay with the team at this point, and I think he should continue to produce in this spot moving forward.
See, Paul, I figured I might hear about Connors, EHLERS. Where are you looking?
Well, I'll mention NIKOLAJ EHLERS of the Jets as they face the Pens tonight. He has 8 points in his last 10 starts and logging first-line minutes and power play time on that strong unit. I know the Pens have been stingy in their last couple of games. AJ hasn't even mentioned the shutout of the Leafs yet, so I'm cringing about that. But the Jets are almost back to full strength, and I think they're going to go on a bit of a roll right now. EHLERS will be a key player tonight and will cost $6,900. Cheaper than that, though, Matt Duchene is on a real heater. Look, he's been much maligned for underperforming against his hefty salary cap, largely on the podcast that AJ and I have done for the last several years. But we can't say that so far this season because he's got 12 goals and 19 points in only 17 games played this year. I say he continues that role against a Ducks team that is playing a wide-open style at both ends of the rink this year.
AJ, what about the, actually, Paul, we'll stay with you on this one, then we'll go to AJ. So, AJ, a little more time for you to think. Where should we be looking on the blue line?
Well, I've referenced the potent Ducks a few times already this season, and yet I still find that Cam Fowler is priced at only $3,800 tonight. That's very low considering that he's the top offensive option for this explosive attack. And he's got 8 points in his last 10 games played and will log a ton of ice time in all the high leverage situations as he does every game for Anaheim. I also look to save on defense usually and find more good value in the lower part of this board tonight, selecting Samuel Girard of the Avs for his favorable matchup against the aforementioned Sens. He has 8 points in his last 10 starts too, and will play over 20 minutes tonight on their second D pairing.
They're not value, AJ, by any stretch, but there's Yossi, there's Pietrangelo, there's some high-end D as well.
Yeah, I'm going to go slightly further down, but certainly not cheap, and that's DEANGELO. He's coming in at 6,200 here. Look, I hate to just really favor just one team, but Tony DeAngelo, like I said, he's not going to cost you the Yossi or Pietrangelo price point. He's quarterbacking that number 1 power play group with Aho, with Svechnikov. Like, he basically could fall into points being on the ice with those guys right now. So as much as I like to get a little bit share outside of just one team, I think tonight's a good opportunity. Just go full stack on Carolina here.
It's okay. You can stick with one team. It just means we know where your money's going. So switching to the DK Sportsbook, AJ, which team are you going to back the most on the money line?
Well, yeah, so for money line, I'm not going to go with the Hurricanes. It's just a little too much juice to give up. I do like them for the puck line, but sticking with money line, Anaheim at plus 125. Prior to Thursday's loss to Carolina, and a lot of teams have lost to Carolina this year, Anaheim was riding an 8-game winning streak, and I wouldn't be surprised to see them pick up where they left off here. In November, the Ducks have allowed just 1.63 goals per game. That's second best in the NHL. They haven't given up a single power play goal this month either, and I think they're just too hot. They ran into the buzzsaw of Carolina I don't understand why they're not the favorites in this one, to be perfectly honest with you.
So what do we think on the money line here, Paul?
I'm not looking at too many of the underdogs here. I find a couple of slim favorites that I like, and I'll take that. I like the offense that the Blue Jackets have been generating in their last 8 games and expect the Jackets to have their way against a weak Buffalo team that's simply going to be overmatched in most of their games this year. The Sabres are bad. Take Columbus at -120. For me, they're much stronger favorites than that. In another game, the Jets are at home against the visiting Pens, and I had said my piece on them earlier. They're normally especially good on home ice as well, and they will offset the Penguins' stout defensive style of play with their own deep offense, and they do have a pretty good goalie in there in Hellebuck as well. Take the Jets at -120.
Which game is most likely to hit the over here, AJ? There are some, fairly huge totals, by NHL standards. Obviously you got a lot of the 5.5, but I mean, there's even a 6.5. There's a 6. What are you expecting here?
Well, honestly, for me, that 6.5 game that you mentioned, the Avs against the Senators, is the spot to target. Look, just coming from news out of morning skate here, Philip Gustafsson is likely going to be the starter for them. Matt Murray was not at practice this morning, though no confirmation on that yet. And, Colorado, we've talked about them and being downright unstoppable of late. But let's not forget the Senators haven't played in over a week. They've got guys coming back from COVID. And even before their 3 games were postponed, they were giving up 4 goals a game tonight in the month of November as well. I think this could be an absolute bloodbath tonight. I would consider looking at, over 7 to get +160, and maybe even consider going over 7.5 in this one to get +215 value on the alternate lines here. This one's going to be just an absolute blowout.
Paul, which one jumps out to you?
A couple of games. I spoke of the Jets and Preds earlier, noting their strong offenses for both teams. This will not be a low-event game, as I expect plenty of goals. Take the over, and don't be shy about looking for the alternate puck, the goal line to go even higher for a greater payoff. And then Carolina's deep offense will play a large part in this game that they have against San Jose. Sharks club, as I said, they're giving up a ton of goals lately. Take the over 5.5 prop here to pay off.
Gentlemen, you're both wonderful. Always enjoy talking to you, and just looking at Paul's background, it always makes me feel smarter. We'll talk again later on this week. Back to the gridiron when we return here on The Sweat. All right, let's get back after it. Our NFL crew is back. Jeff Ulrich, Reed Fowler, Bucs, Giants on the way tonight to wrap up Week 11. Guys, Tampa Bay has been reeling lately. Tom Brady's been moody as well. Jeff, is the future Hall of Famer worthy of your captain spot tonight? Nice bounce back for him, or are you going to look elsewhere?
I'm going to look elsewhere. Brady is definitely in play. I mean, look, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers heading in here with like an over 30-point implied team total. We're expecting some points, but I'm going to roll the dice here and go with Daniel Jones at 9,600 in the flex. He's 14-4 in the captain spot. It's just when you look at these price differentials, I mean, the $2,000 savings, I think with Daniel Jones is worth taking on here. You've got a Tampa Bay funnel to the pass defense. Teams throw not 39 times against them, and they just don't allow teams to run. I think with Saquon Barkley being back too, the tendency is to think, well, the Giants are going to run more, but I think it actually helps Daniel Jones more. It gives him a more explosive piece in the passing offense. I think the Giants are going to keep this game close. I think Daniel Jones is the quarterback I'd rather be on. I think if I was going to go to the Tampa Bay side, it would actually be Leonard Fournette. But I'm going to say Daniel Jones. I think all things considered, you got 2 equal skill players there. Daniel Jones is cheaper. The quarterback touches the ball more. I'll go with Daniel Jones.
What about you, Reed?
Yeah, I like how you got that little jab in with Tom Brady being moody.
Well, he has. The press conference after that last loss was like a minute.
Well, when you lose to the Washington football team by 10 points after bye, you're going to be pretty peeved as your TB12 because does not expect that. But I'm going to go with Tom Brady. I mean, come on. he is mad. And when he's mad and moody, he plays well, right? I think he's going to go for over 3 touchdowns in this game. I think before last week's debacle, like I just talked about, they were averaging, he's averaging just under 29 DK fantasy points. And the Giants don't have a good pass rush to get after him. And I like that someone is coming back, supposedly, still questionable coming into this, and in number 87 is BFF. He's going to be active for the first time since, I think, week 3. That's the assumption. So I'm going to go Tom Brady, 16-8.
Who would you like to stack with your captain then?
I will like to stack Rob Gronkowski, but if I'm going to try and find value here, Koff, I'm going to actually go with John Ross. I think Gronkowski is a great stack. I don't trust guys like Chris Godwin and especially Mike Evans going against James Bradbury. But if I'm going to go on value, give me John Ross. Sterling Shepard is still out. I'm trying to find out who, like in 3 wide receiver sets, because Dante Pettis is also on IR. It's going to be this guy right here. And Tampa Bay doesn't give up a lot. They haven't given up a lot to speedy receivers this year. But if Jeff is right in that Daniel Jones has to pass, this guy gets down the field. He's $400. John Ross is $400. Get him in your lineup if he is going to be in those 3 wide receiver sets.
$400, only 5 snaps last week, but like Reed said, injuries certainly can play into roles, so we'll see which way that goes. Jeff, what about you? You paid down just a little bit at captain, still might want a little bit of value. Who are you going to stack?
No, I mean, I like the fact that Reed brought up John Ross. He's $400. Who cares if he plays 5 snaps? Because really, you're just looking for that one deep ball. Doesn't even have to go for a touchdown at 400. You get to like a 40-yard catch or something, and that's it. But I'm sticking with that theme. I'm going with KADARIUS TONEY. I think this is a player who's in a very, very big spot tonight. He leads the Giants wide receiver core in targets over the last 5 games. He's playing around. The Giants are basically rotating their top 3 wide receivers. Sometimes they're throwing like guys like Reed mentioned, Pettis or John Ross on the field, but it's really Toney, Darius Slate, and Kenny Golladay just rotating snaps. And Toney has been the most productive and the most explosive of those 3. I think that, again, in a game where you have to pass the ball, I mean, it's just Tampa. You have to pass the ball against them. It's a very good spot for KADARIUS TONEY to potentially break out. He's 6,800. If you're going to play Daniel Jones in the top spot, I mean, you got to go with one of his receivers in the flex. And for me, it's definitely KADARIUS TONEY, a player I'd want exposure to regardless of who you're putting in that captain.
Okay, so that's DFS. Let's go sportsbook here. Any favorite player prop tonight, Reed?
Brady over 2.5 touchdowns. This is plus money. He's hit this mark, over this mark, 5 of his last contests. 27 total passing touchdowns for your boy, or I guess your former boy through
He's
week
still
10.
my boy.
Of course, he's everybody's. But unless you're a Raiders fan, tuck rule. But he leads all quarterbacks, coming into week 10 with 27 pass tutties and 7.2 touchdown rate. That's second in the league. So yeah, I like that. Brady over 2.5, and this one's just for you, Koff. Also, give me him over half a yard rushing, just because QB sneak.
You love the QB rushing.
I love it.
I'm all about it. All right, what do you think, Moose?
Angry Tom Brady, just going to be out there rushing the ball, RPOs to the moon. He's going to probably play defense tonight too, right? I'll give you a couple here. I obviously like Daniel Jones, so I got to like his over on a 243 passing yardage prop here. This is really low for any NFL quarterback. And it's really, really low for an NFL quarterback playing against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Only twice has an opposing quarterback against Tampa Bay gone for under this mark, if we include the combined total from New Orleans a few weeks ago. And the quarterbacks who didn't hit the over on this mark were Jalen Hurts and Justin Fields. Again, low volume passing offenses, rush first quarterbacks. I'll also give you one more. You go to the player props on the DraftKings Sportsbook. You go to the wide receiver section. KADARIUS TONEY to go over 100 receiving yards is plus 1,000. I love that bet. Those are massive odds. I just mentioned Tony's going to be out there. He's the type of player who can get you like a 70-yard touchdown or something and get all that yardage at once. That's a big one to look for under the player props section, DraftKings Sportsbook.
We need some slate-approved picks. Favorite bet on the board tonight. I'm not sure which way you're going to go, Jeff. Reed inevitably is going to go right on back to Tom Brady, which I'm here for. But, Jeff, who do you like?
I'm going very simple. I'm taking the Giants plus 10.5 here. I mean, the Giants, for all their flaws, they're an average team. They're not bad. I mean, with Daniel Jones as starter, only once, and that was back in week 1, have they lost by more than 3 points this year. Now they're 3-4 with Daniel Jones, but they've only lost 1 game by more than 3 points. Now you're giving them 10.5 against a Tampa team who, lost 2 games in a row. They just lost. They barely beat the Eagles, and they lost to Washington, 2 teams in the NFC East. Are we even sure those teams are better than the Giants? I think this is way too big a spread. Give me the Giants plus 10.5 tonight.
Reed, Tom Brady plus 2.5 touchdowns?
I already gave you that one. I'm not about repetitive.
It could
right?
be your favorite still.
Right, of course, Brady. Let's smash all the Brady props. And I'll give Jeff 2 names, Joe Judge and Jason Garrett. That's why they're 10.5-point dogs. I mean, Daniel Jones is fine, but Jason Garrett doesn't get KADARIUS Toney the ball ever for God knows what reason. And Joe Judge will just be fine going 3 and out with 3 run plays. But give me Gronk. Give me Gronk. I think the sentiment on Gronk is low. 2 or more touchdowns at plus 850. All this guy does is catch touchdowns. You don't think him coming back in this game is going to do that? And if you go to the same game parlay, anytime touchdown plus 3+ reception gives you plus 215 for Gronk. I really like that. Again, this is if he's in the game. If he's in the game, he's gotten 2 full practices Thursday, Friday.
Listen to this. Player parlay Gronk plus 2,800 to go over 100 receiving yards and score a touchdown. Plus 2,800.
For the man, 87. He's
Those are
healthy.
cult type odds. Those are like Russell Henley odds there, Reed.
Oh, Russell Henley. Love him.
I hate
Never
to let
wins.
I hate to see you two go, but you are done. Alas, we have to move on. There's one segment to go, so thank you for being here with us, obviously. It's Hoops. We'll hit the hardwood next. Well, you might say we saved the best for last. DK contributor Matt Meiselman, RotoWire's Nick Whalen. They're here for a look around the association before we get out of here. Busy 10-game slate tonight, fellas. It's all about DFS here, so let's dive a little deep into it. Matt, we need a guard priced over $7,000 tonight. Who do you like?
So there's one team in particular tonight that has a couple guys missing, and I think a lot of the field is going to go to the cheaper players on the Memphis Grizzlies. DeAnthony Melton's out, Dylan Brooks is out. And it's not that I don't like those guys, but for a pay-up guard, I think Ja Morant probably goes overlooked. There's some big names on this slate. Giannis is playing, Durant and Harden, at least as of now. Who knows what kind of news we're going to get. But I think Morant goes overlooked in large part because the Grizzlies are 10-point underdogs in Utah against the Jazz, kind of a tough spot. But the upside's there, and Morant's last 2 games haven't been great. But it's entirely because the Grizzlies won in blowouts. They beat the Rockets. They actually beat the Clippers in a game where Morant didn't play down the stretch either. So if the Grizzlies do keep it close, I think the upside for Morant is definitely there, and he could wind up being the highest scoring player tonight.
Yeah, it could certainly be at least mid-40s for him anyway. What do you think, Nick?
Yeah, I think Matt's on the right track as far as targeting that game. I'll highlight a few other guards that I like in this range. I think if you want to go just over 7K, TYRESE MAXEY at 7,400 is a player that I like tonight. He's still playing a ton of minutes for that team, 35 to 40 minutes virtually every night, it seems, for TYRESE MAXEY. Coming off of a 50 DraftKings point game against Portland on Sunday. I mean, I'm not going to steer you away from James Harden at Cleveland. 11,600 is the tag for him. So you're paying up, but he's starting to look more like the James Harden we've been accustomed to seeing for the last 7 or 8 years. And then I think LaMelo Ball, another pay up option at Washington tonight. He's at 10,200. 60 to 70 DraftKings point upside pretty much every time he takes the floor at this point. Obviously, he's not going to hit those numbers every time, but what he's doing as a scorer, a rebounder, an assister, He has multiple steals. Even in 5 of his last 6 games, he's been really, really good.
Just because I like to play too. Anthony Edwards in a real good spot tonight. Guys, value guard, someone under 4,500. I mean, Nick, I'm looking here. Patty Mills, Bogdan Bogdanovic, Kevin Huerter, Cam Payne. Who do you like?
Well, Herter's one of the guys on my list. I think 4,200 remains a pretty good deal for a guy who is kind of the obvious fill-in with DeAndre Hunter out long-term. And obviously Atlanta has other options. They're so deep. But he's played 32 and 34 minutes in his first 2 games, filling in for Hunter. Again, at 4,200, I think you're still getting a steal on his potential upside. And then going back to that Memphis-Utah game, yeah, this isn't a great matchup for the Grizzlies, especially if they're shorthanded without 2 key pieces in Brooks and Melton. But that could pave the way for a guy like Tyus Jones, who's down at 3,400 to see a few more minutes in this game. And he's already put up 23 and 26 DraftKings points, respectively, over his last 2 games, despite those guys being in the lineup and despite Jones playing fewer than 20 minutes in each of those games. So even if you tack on, 4, 5, 6 more minutes for Jones, that could pay dividends.
Matt, who stands out to you?
So Nick mentioned TYRESE MAXEY already, and that's a game where we actually do have some injury news we're waiting on. It's the one at this point, I think, with relevant, uncertain news, with Tobias Harris still being questionable. So if he's out, FURKAN KORKMAZ is guard and forward eligible, but he's only 3,900. And we saw KORKMAZ actually do really well for a long stretch of games while Harris was out. Embiid's been out. Obviously, Ben Simmons hasn't been playing. Matisse Thybulle is back, but this is his first game back. I think he was out with COVID, so he's likely on a minutes restriction. I think if Harris doesn't play, KORKMAZ almost certainly starts, and that's way too low of a price tag for him. We'll just have to kind of wait and see what happens with the Sixers later tonight. They're in Sacramento. That is a very late game.
Let's go with the same parameters here, but at forward, Matt, we'll start with you. Someone north of 7K.
So this will be a quicker answer because I just kind of gave the situation already, but Harris himself, if he does play, I think that the questionable tag will scare people off if it carries past lock. And with Embiid still out, Harris is 8,100. The matchup couldn't be much better. They're playing a Sacramento Kings team that isn't good defensively and plays at a high pace. So if Harris does end up on the floor, I think he could be a really strong play that probably doesn't get a ton of ownership.
Nick, what do you think?
Yeah, I like that call with the injury tag on Harris. If he does play, I think that does scare some people away. I think we could see something similar too with Jaylen Brown. He'll likely be back in the lineup tonight. I think a lot of people might be a little skittish staying away from him with that hamstring injury, but I think he's in a pretty good spot. I mean, his teammate Jason Tatum has looked a lot better lately. He's up at $10,100. Obviously, Brown coming back maybe complicates things for Jason Tatum, but 3 straight 30-plus point games heading into tonight. He started to look more like the scorer we've been used to seeing over the last couple of years. DeMar DeRozan, 9,100 at Indiana. I think it's a pretty safe play. I like Chris Middleton as well at 7,800. This will now be his 4th game back from COVID protocols. They've kind of had some training wheels on him these first 3 games, but I mean, when he's healthy and he's right, he's such a high floor option that I always love deploying.
I think what really stands out here is we'll stay with you here, Nick. We'll go back to value forwards under $4,500. It's not a stud night. It's really all about value tonight. Yeah, it really is. And there are so many options with 10 games on the slate. I mentioned Kevin Huerter as a guard. He's also forward eligible on DraftKings. So, if you want to fit him in there, you can certainly do that. Returning once again to that Utah-Memphis game, Kyle Anderson at 4,400 is intriguing with no Brooks and no Melton. Of course, though, tough matchup against Utah, so you do have to weigh that. On the other side of that one, I do like Royce O'Neal as kind of the high floor, obviously a low ceiling option, but $4,200, that's about what you expect. Memphis, of course, worst defensive team in the league heading into tonight. They gave up a ton of wide open threes. Opponents are shooting 40.2% from 3 on the season against the Memphis Grizzlies. That is by far the worst mark in the league. And Royce O'Neal, kind of that quintessential 3-and-D player who could take advantage of that. And the one other player I'll highlight quickly, Danilo Gallinari, 4,000 going up against OKC. Pretty deep discount here. I feel like for a guy who's on the short list of players benefiting from that absence of DeAndre Hunter. He went for 35 DraftKings points Saturday against Charlotte. Kind of a boomer bust guy, but if you're looking for someone in that category, I do like Gallinari down at 4,000. Matt, you've got about 20 seconds. Who do you like?
All right, Nick's mentioned a couple Hawks guys. I'll add Cam Reddish to the mix, especially if Bogdan Bogdanovic doesn't play. There could be some extra Hawks value. Just quickly, the Nets are still missing Joe Harris, and Bruce Brown is injured now too. So DeAndre Bembry, probably the chalk value play at forward. He's very cheap at 3,100, but I think that makes a lot of sense too if he starts.
All right, guys, thank you very much. A lot of great insights there. It's going to do it for us. An hour goes by in a blink, obviously, so thanks to everyone who helped us out today, both on camera and, of course, behind the scenes. We got a few Madden simulations coming your way on the DraftKings YouTube and Twitch pages starting at noon, minutes from now, Eastern, with a Chargers-Panthers contest. Then later on today, 5 o'clock Eastern, the slate, Jeff, Matt, Brendan Glasheen, more on Week 11 in the NFL. So do not miss it. The sweat comes your way Monday through Friday, plus Sundays during the football season. I'm Adam Kaufman. It's time to feed the meter.